Hello, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Juliana Smith, and I serve as the Deputy Athletics Director and Senior Women Administrator at Colgate University. I'm a proud graduate of the NCAA Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute helped me refine my gifts and develop new skills for navigating my career as a college athletics professional. I gained clarity about how I want to continue serving within college athletics, and the Leadership Institute helped me build a community of colleagues who support and challenge me through meaningful relationships. As leaders, we should accept the responsibility to continue learning, to continue growing, and to bring others along with us.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and review 1Q wherever you listen to podcasts. Our guest today is Eric Nepomuceno. Eric is the Senior Associate Athletics Director of Compliance at UNLV. Greetings, Eric. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here.
Yes, sir. I'm glad you're here, too. Now, you've been at UNLV since 2018, working there with Desiree. You've worked at Northeastern, Stony Brook, Queens College, and spent some time in personnel for the New York Jets. You're also educated as a lawyer. In terms of college athletics, you've been in the industry for almost 20 years, so you're a veteran in the industry, and I'm happy to have you on. There is one nick in your bio, and that's that you went to University of Michigan, but I don't think that will prevent a good conversation between the two of us, right?
No, not at all. And, I wasn't aware that you were a Sparty, and I'm glad that I wasn't, because I may not be on here if I hadn't.
Hilarious. So think about this. I want you to imagine something. You think about a dinner plate full to the edges with food, right? And you're thinking to yourself, how could I possibly add more food to this plate without either adding a second plate or piling more food on top so the stack of food gets higher and higher? At some point, the stuff will start to fall on the table and you just won't be able to put any more food on the plate. You work in compliance, right? Compliance in general is a very busy, attention to detail, staying educated type of career in college athletics. And now you guys have to deal with name, image, and likeness. So that's basically what I want to talk to you about, is how in compliance do you handle what you guys handle? And I want to start with the first question of, in compliance, right? It's much more than just educating the coaches, staff, and student athletes. But I know that's probably one of the top 2 or 3 things you do, is make sure people are educated on what the rules are. There's liability things that have to do with that too. But what are some of the areas of compliance that you look forward to? And then when you think about it, how do you manage keeping all your food on that plate?
Yeah, Ty, thanks for that question. I really appreciate that analogy. I think it's the first time I've heard it as it relates to the compliance industry, and it couldn't be more spot on, right? We're constantly really trying to stay afloat and trying to stay ahead of the game. So, I mean, in terms of, the staple, and you've touched on it, right? Education, documentation, monitoring, and enforcement. That's our gig. Those are kind of the 4 pillars of what we're trying to make sure we're executing on a day-to-day to protect the institution and promote an atmosphere of compliance. But it's so much more than that. I mean, in terms of, what I appreciate and really look forward to in my role is really relationships. I'd like to consider myself a people person. And man, the relationships that I build with our student athletes are some of the greatest and most rewarding to me, just because I'm able to assist these young adults through their journey, right? Through their academic collegiate years, and their journey as athletes. So whether it's going out to a game, and connecting with them on the sidelines, or maybe they're coming into my office and I'm helping them with a waiver, those are how I have impact. And those are some of the ways or some of the things that I look forward to in my day to day. I truly believe that that's my role, kind of on that global athletics landscape and that team. And I feel like I have the ability to affect change. Having a waiver pass for a student athlete really changes their experience, right? Whether or not they can get on the field of the court that first year. And so I take pride in when I approach those things. And then the relationships go beyond just our athletes, right? It's the coaches that, we get to sit in and brainstorm together approaches, and really just build relationships because they understand that we need to have the spirit of compliance and they want to follow the rules, but sometimes it's about being resourceful. And then certainly the coworkers, I feel as the compliance department has a unique opportunity to work with a wide scope and a wide range of departments. So whether it's admissions or financial aid or housing, it gives me an opportunity to understand that landscape and then really build relationships with those people.
Thinking about name, image, and likeness, right? This is a conversation that is probably too early, but not too late, right, to start in terms of any type of finality of understanding what's going on. But are you, and this may be an in general question about college athletics departments around the country, is the compliance person and possibly the athletics director the primary source of trying to wrap their minds around what's happening? Like, is everybody coming to you? Or tell me about your process of within the department, before you even get to students, within the department, of keeping everybody educated or even yourself educated on what's happening and how you guys do things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Ty. And I think because name, image, and likeness obviously was tied to NCAA bylaws, the immediate response was, yeah, let's go to compliance and ask them. But as you know, it's much more than that. In January, there was a Department of Justice letter written to Mark Emmert. And so now at the state and federal levels, like this is being evaluated. And as a result, you're going to need the athletic director philosophy and directive in terms of how to approach the situation. Because to your point, there isn't anything definitive and there isn't that line in the sand that's been drawn. So a lot of us are taking not necessarily our best guess, but we are just trying to do what we've always done and make decisions based on, your institution's mission statement, your core values, and student athlete welfare, right? And then from a compliance standpoint, it's all about protecting student athlete, whether it's their eligibility, or really now this opportunity to be an entrepreneur. So yes, coaches have come to us. We are managing based on what we have seen, and really the NCAA has provided guidance in terms of, well, no pay for play, no recruiting inducements, and we know that that can occur. So we're now just relying on institutional core values to help direct us as we make decisions in this space.
Yeah, so just more on the plate, more food on
You
that
know
plate.
it.
Just reading. Like, are you guys having, in terms of compliance? And sorry to put this on you in terms of speaking for compliance in general, but are there webinars and phone calls, and are you texting with people from other schools? Like, how are you guys handling this? Or tell me about the communication amongst colleagues with regard to name, image, and likeness.
One of the great things about compliance and the industry is that we're really not competing against each other, and we understand we're all in the trenches together, regardless of what school you're at. And so, yes, there have been several webinars. The conference has led something, and then certainly I got a text group here with a bunch of my counterparts at other institutions to figure out, hey, what are you doing in this space, right? Do you have a forum for that? What does education look like? And so, they're able to share ideas. I'm able to bounce ideas off of them. And again, as you know, sometimes this is going to come down to institution specific needs and institution specific concentration areas. So it's not all going to look the same, but the hope is to have some sort of uniformity and conformity across institutions.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you talk about compliance, folks don't necessarily compete with each other, right? Well, unless you got to tell on the coach cheating and recruiting, which I've heard about in years past. But other coaches, not on your campus, other coaches from other campuses, right? But I think that's interesting. There's a collective education, a collective let's stay on point so we can make sure our campuses in general and the industry are taking care of the people who matter, and that's the student athletes. Let's talk about specifics there at UNLV. What kind of processes or what do you guys have in place there in terms of name, image, and likeness?
Because we thought they were going to turn the switch on in January, we actually were well prepared for the July 1 start date. We had a committee formalized last year that was going to handle this, right? Whatever it looked like. And so that committee included myself, a cross section of coaches, student athlete feedback, and then just a cross section of administrators that were relevant to the space, marketing, branding, etc. we wanted to think about what we would allow for our students to do, but the reality is based on state legislation, there actually isn't a lot that we can prevent, right? So that was a really interesting dynamic to really work through. And so what we've done is we've created a three-prong education platform called the Vegas Effect. Where we landed was we need to make sure that we're educating our student athletes before they're going out and signing on these deals, right? Because the fear there is that they can get exploited and taken advantage of. And one of the big pillars to the name, image, and likeness space is that athletics can't have any involvement in executing and organizing any of these name, image, and likeness deals for student athletes. So, we have to remove ourselves from the actual transaction of that. But what we can do is educate on the front end. So we've started to do that, whether it's brand management, financial literacy, tax, contracts. So, what we're trying to do is provide our student athletes with information and equip them with the tools to be successful in this particular landscape.
Without naming any fellow or colleagues at any schools, what is the difference between what they're maybe dealing with in another state and what you're dealing with there in Nevada?
Yeah, I really think it relies on what state specific rules are. Some of them, for example, Nevada focuses a lot on education, which is great because now we are almost obligated to make sure we're providing this information to our student athletes. Not all states have that as a requirement. Right now, the rule allows for our student athletes to retain representation in the marketing space. There are some states that are a little bit more liberal and say that they can just retain an agent through athletics, or athletics can be involved. Every state has identified a different area in name, image, and likeness, and there's just so much on that plate alone that it's really hard to figure out, well, hey, where do we start? It's an everything type thing, right? But yeah, the state specific legislations are the ones that kind of will determine how you approach it on your campus, because you have to align with what your state is requiring you to do.
Yeah, which is interesting. A few years back, Desiree was on the forefront of educating people about the betting thing that was happening across the country in terms of states, and Las Vegas being Las Vegas, right? I wonder about that aspect of it in terms of, obviously, betting and NCAA are not two words that within the industry need to be said in the same sentence unless you're saying don't do it. But I wonder just about that aspect, as educated as you guys are being in Las Vegas about gambling, right? Are there any potential road bumps you see in the industry, or specifically there in Las Vegas or Nevada when you talk about name, image, and likeness?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that's what we're still trying to promote, that because there are other rules that haven't changed, like the sports wagering bylaw has not changed, and it's still impermissible for athletes to wager on games that have championships sponsored by the NCAA. We would not advocate for our athletes to be partnered with sports books, for example. Again, have we crossed that line, and have we seen that test case? We haven't, but we're, again, just to go back to the core values, anything that really has involvement with drugs and alcohol, adult entertainment, sports wagering, these are the things that we would ask our student athletes: consider your long-term brand management. Is this something that you want to be involved with today at the expense of what it could cost you in the future, right? Because as we all know now, this stuff on social media, it doesn't go away, right? So you make one poor choice, you post it online, and it sticks with you. So, one of the things we preach to our student athletes is think about the long game. Don't just think about the first deal or the easy deal, right? Have a plan, think about the long game as you enter this space.
Yeah, that's interesting. Gambling could be an issue if someone were to allow it personally, as an organization, as a team, as a campus, and really as an industry. I wonder about thinking further into name, image, and likeness. Have you been surprised by anything? I mean, you said you guys were working on it because you thought it was a January 1 start, so you were educating yourself and seeing how things unfolded, but it has unfolded. Have you been surprised by anything in the last few weeks that you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think I've been surprised by two things. One, I thought there would be a little bit more action, so to speak, right? I think obviously you expected, premier Power Five positions to get kind of the first bite at the apple, so to speak. So that doesn't surprise me. I just, I guess, with how prepared we were, and to see how some of these schools are just starting their name, image, and likeness platform, I guess that caught me a little bit off guard. So the volume of it, I guess it was almost anticlimactic, right? We were waiting for this for almost a year now, and just thought,
Somebody get that $3 million
yeah,
deal
right. I
right
just
off the
thought
bat.
that it was, oh, it's all going to happen now, and then, but it makes sense, right? Because like any other business deal, there's a great deal of knowledge that individuals are trying to acquire before executing, and then there's also a feeling out process, and no one's jumping into it. So I guess that even though I'm surprised by that, it's a pleasant surprise, because hopefully what that means is our student athletes are being careful, and they're looking to make good decisions. I think the second thing that I've seen is some of the deals, again from a compliance standpoint, and I haven't been privy to the contracts, but I look at those deals and I'm like, hmm, how is this not a recruiting inducement? And again, it's because you started with this. There's not a lot of definition that's been applied to this application. So I think we're all just waiting for that, in terms of, hey, is this going to be considered permissible? And so my guess is that institutions, some of them are slow playing it a little bit, because the reality is we're all still trying to figure it out together.
Hands in the air, just listening and reading and learning and trying to figure it out. And like most things, you see what happens, and that ends up being a bad thing. Okay, we need to we need to policy that out real quick, legislate that out. You're thinking about that plate of food again, right? I guess an organized way of adding food, or of organizing your plate of food. I'm kind of guy that lets everything mix together and eats it. Some people are very organized, don't want things to touch, but one thing is to find the most effective way out of the analogy, right? I don't want to find the most effective way to organize your food on your plate, but find the most effective way to communicate what's important in terms of compliance. And I wonder about you and your experience in the industry, communicating with the athletics director. I know you communicate with general counsel on a broader campus, communicating with student athletes, with coaches, with other staff and your colleagues. What ways have you found to be effective in terms of educating about issues, about things they can and can't do, et cetera, in terms of compliance?
Sure. Again, I really appreciate that plate of food analogy. Similar to you, I'm organized, where I don't want my food to touch. I want to make sure I know, maybe order of how to eat, and all of that stuff. So I say that because I carry that into the practice, right? Like, we are cyclical, and work off a calendar in nature. So what we're doing this August, to an extent, we did last August and the August before then, and we're going to do the same thing next August. And so I just make sure that we're intentional with our education platform like that. We know what months to target, what type of rules education. Super Bowl football, for football, February, we're always reinforcing, don't bet on it, right? Because there's a high propensity that our athletes may be asked to join something, something as innocuous as Super Bowl squares, but they don't understand that's still gambling on that sport, right? So we make sure that we're organized, and we have a strategy with how we're going to educate. Is it virtual? Is it in person? Is it a letter? Who we're going to educate? Is it donors, family, friends, student athletes? And then when we're going to educate, right? And we will typically set that out into motion, really right now. This is the time of the year that we're planning forward, and we're talking about where are the high concentration areas for this particular year. What do we need to make sure that individuals are aware of? And so, as you can only imagine, this year it's name, image, and likeness. We want to make sure that our donors and friends of the program are aware that, yes, you can enter into these contracts with our student athletes, but here are the parameters. We can't be involved. And then one of the things we haven't touched on, which is one of the main ways to protect everyone involved, is disclosure. And the athletes are required to disclose to the institution these activities that now they'll be engaging in.
Yeah, this disclosure is interesting. I mean, is there hard language, or is that one of those areas where we're trying to figure it out? If a student athlete does not disclose and shows up on Instagram with a company that you guys did not know about, I mean, if the company isn't a competing or company that you guys, if it like that just seems like one of those gray areas that's left up to compliance to, hey, at some point we probably either need to legislate this or make sure there's some hard language. Tell me about the thought process on that disclosure thing.
Well, I mean, you're spot on in terms of kind of how you're evaluating, Ty. The disclosure is actually in our state language, so we have teeth there, right, where we can point to, hey, our state statute requires for you to disclose to the institution. I think what hasn't been as developed is really the sanctions portion of it, right, and figuring out what makes sense and kind of quote unquote what penalty will fit the crime, so to speak, right. And it's going to range from, did they use our logo impermissibly? Did they not disclose? And there's some sort of institutional component to it, like maybe they had to pay for facility usage, right? And again, I don't know, but it's going to be a layered thing where not until we see a couple of these can we really hone into, well, what makes sense in this space. And I think what everyone's using right now is just kind of stock. It could impact, may impact, will impact your eligibility, which it rightfully could, right? Where, from a student or an institutional policy standpoint, we certainly have the rights to have reasonable sanctions and penalties in different spaces.
Right, which you never really want to use. You just hope everybody's educated enough to be proactive and not do the things that you ask them not to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. The last thing here before we wrap is the school name or logo. Logo specifically, I operated a company where I was hired by Baylor Athletics to activate sponsorships, right? Now, we probably couldn't put our logo with Baylor University Athletics logo without possibly getting in some type of merchandising agreement or having express permission to be able to use that logo. I wonder about that aspect of it, of if a student, say they had the resources to enter in a merchandising agreement, could they then use the logo? And there's a whole bunch of gray areas. So that's one area that popped into my brain. And we talked about it a little bit offline in terms of a merchandising agreement to be able to use the logo in terms of promotions or whatever. So I don't know.
Sure. I think every school is taking a different stance, and that's what I've seen across the nation. You have some that are being a little bit more permissive, and then some that are being very restrictive in terms of that's our brand, not yours. At UNLV, we're permissive to the extent that they go through our normal business channels, right? So you're spot on in terms of the licensing component. It's different if a student athlete wants to use the logo in a picture, or wear the logo on a jersey where they are going to participate in an appearance, versus they want to put the logo on a shirt and then sell that as merchandise, right? So they need to license that and then just go through whatever normal business policy our branding and marketing department has. So again, it would be permissible here, but we need the disclosure in order to find out about those opportunities versus finding out that it's been done, right? And then, this takes us back to, then what would the sanction be? Is that a cease and desist? Is that, what does that look like? And the good thing is, I think I would take compliance out of that, because we would just default to, hey, what are our normal business channels there? What's your protocol? How would you handle a third party entity that also is going through that? And we have that in place. So it's something where you don't need to reinvent the wheel. We would just apply it accordingly.
All right, which is interesting. Thinking back to that dinner plate, I'm sure you guys in compliance and athletic directors too, and everybody else in the industry is constantly trying to figure out ways to keep food from splitting off the side and keep control of the industry how they need to, so they can provide a successful environment for student athletes. And it sounds like that's what you're trying to do there at UNLV. Eric, I really appreciate you joining us on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Ty. It's been my pleasure.
That was Eric Nepomuceno. He is the Senior Associate Athletics Director for Compliance at UNLV. And of course, I am Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.